Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a Premier Field Engineer specializing in management technologies. Today's discussion is part 5 of an ongoing series focusing on ConfigMgr, Current Branch, and the Microsoft Cloud, Azure. This installment specifically talking about upgrade readiness. So here's our agenda as we get started. Right, we're going to first start, what is upgrade readiness? Why do we as ConfigMgr admins care about upgrade readiness? How do we go about configuring upgrade readiness? We'll talk about that standalone and ConfigMgr integrated. A word about that before we go forward. Upgrade readiness is itself a service in Azure. It can work totally without ConfigMgr. So when we talk about configuring upgrade readiness, it's really not configuring requirements. Say it again. It's really not that you require ConfigMgr to configure it. You can do it completely standalone without any ConfigMgr. The real advantage of ConfigMgr comes in terms of being able to absorb the data that upgrade readiness produces and make decisions on that data in ConfigMgr. Yes, there's a part in ConfigMgr where you configure client settings to kind of turn things on. That's a great convenience. But the big win in ConfigMgr is consuming the data from upgrade readiness. All right, we'll see that as we go along. We'll wrap things up, kind of putting it all together, visualizing how all of these pieces fit together, do some troubleshooting tips and tricks, give you some resources, and we'll be done. So let's jump in. What is upgrade readiness? Well, put simply, upgrade readiness is the Azure version of what we've had for a while called the Application Compatibility Toolkit. The Application Compatibility Toolkit is something you could use. It would run in your environment, give you data back on systems in your environment. Contrast that to upgrade readiness that runs in Azure. It collects data from anyone around the world that uses upgrade readiness, and then we can take that broad set of data and provide it to you so you can make judgments on your upgrade readiness, right? So a much bigger data set, much more accuracy and so forth, right? Also, upgrade readiness is an automated upgrade compatibility analysis. This works going from Windows 7 to 10, Windows 8 to 10, and even Windows 10 to a new version of Windows 10, right? So bear that in mind. Now, in order to use upgrade readiness with Windows 7, Windows 8.1, you may very well need to apply some hotfixes, right? So keep that in mind. I'll share more on that later. So why upgrade readiness? Kind of cover that just a little bit, right? As we approach upgrading from Windows 7 to 10, Windows 8 to 10, Windows 10 to 10, we want those upgrades to be predictable, to go according to plan, right? So having upgrade readiness gives us data to rely on that will give us comfort that the upgrade is ready to go, right? We don't see any potential roadblocks or hurdles and so on. We want to do this analysis before we upgrade. And so we can collect certain data, right? We can get detailed computer and application inventory. We can get application and driver detail, get insights into those, get suggested fixes for drivers and applications, any compatibility issues, and so on. Let the analysis be data-driven, right? Data exported from your environment, from representative machines, and so forth, right? Diagnostic data. So how do you resolve issues, perhaps, that you find, right? This whole process can be automated. So you do have to configure it, and then once you configure it, it just runs, and you can reap the benefits of having it just run in your environment and keep going. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. ConfigMgr integration, really good benefit, right? If we have the data in upgrade readiness, that's awesome, and we can look at it and learn from it. But being able to connect ConfigMgr and let it consume that data is an extra level of ability to leverage that data in a coordinated way, to control upgrades, know what systems are ready for upgrade, and so forth, right? And then finally, it's free, right? For Windows 10 Pro, Education, Enterprise, this is a free service that we provide to help you as you approach upgrading in your environments. So let's get into the fun stuff, right? Configuring upgrade readiness. First of all, here's a bit of the flow, right? Pretty simple. And so we have Azure here. We have an IT pro. We have a couple of systems here that are going to be providing upgrade data to upgrade readiness. So essentially what happens in a standalone configuration is these systems will run what are called deployment scripts. And you'll choose how often to run them. There's different ways that you can cause these scripts to run, right? If you don't have a system like ConfigMgr, you could use Task Scheduler or so many other ways to get these scripts out there. And you'll run them on a periodic basis and supply data up into upgrade readiness. Once the data arrives in upgrade readiness, then between 48 and 56 hours, we're going to process that and make it visible to you in the portal, right? So that's the general flow. See how it works, right? So in terms of standalone, there are some requirements. You do need to have Azure Active Directory. You do need to have an Azure resource group that you can configure upgrade readiness in. You do need to have deployment scripts and supported operating systems and set your telemetry the right way. And shouldn't probably have to mention this, but an internet connection. So what I want to do is walk through how we would configure upgrade readiness. The first part is to provision upgrade readiness in Azure. The second part is going to be enrolling devices so that they can then participate in upgrade readiness. All right. Let me pull in my browser, which is focused in on Azure. So as we kind of get started on this, the first thing to do is provision upgrade readiness. All right, so if I do that, you see the search will show you the upgrade readiness as a solution in the marketplace. Now, a word about this as we kind of get into it. As of this recording, well, let me say it this way. Upgrade readiness formerly was a component of Operations Manager Suite, right? Operations Management Suite. So the Operations Management Suite was a separate component, if you will, from Azure. And inside of that, there would be a number of different solutions. Upgrade Readiness was one of them, one of many, actually. As of this recording, and just recently, we finally retired the Operations Management Suite and really kind of retasked all of those solutions across Azure. Makes it a much more seamless experience just to have them all out there. And that's what you're seeing here. So another thing to say is, just as a reminder, is Operations Management Suite really has always been log analytics. So in this case, Upgrade Readiness is a solution that will fit inside of the log analytics workspace. All of this will come clear to you in a minute, right? But just to show you, you can get to Upgrade Readiness just by clicking here and clicking on it to go create a solution. Now, in my case, I've actually got several log analytics workspaces already that I could choose from. But you notice Upgrade Readiness does require the log analytics workspace. That's why I just mentioned Upgrade Readiness is a solution that really fits into the log analytics workspace. If I want to create a new one, which I'm going to use one of my existing ones, but if I want to create a new one, I click on the plus and I just answer some questions. Create new, link existing, what name, what subscription I want to use, and finally, what resource group this solution will be put into. So you do need a resource group to put this solution into. You'll see how the resource group comes into play, but just a quick reminder from the intro, a resource group kind of is a sandbox where you put common resources together that you want to be able to talk to each other, right? And so, as an example, if you're also going to be using other Windows Analytics solutions such as Device Health or Update Compliance or those other solutions that you might have at one time used or seen or whatever in the old OMS workspace, Operations Management Suite workspace, if you're going to be using those, it's a good idea to include them all in the same workspace, right? And ultimately the same resource group as you see here. And then finally, you can configure what the pricing tier is that you, or sorry, what the region is that you want, and then pricing tier. So there are a couple of different pricing tiers that you can choose for log analytics. The the Upgrade Readiness piece is free, right? There are other pieces inside log analytics that are going to require a cost, and so you can choose what the pricing tier is here. But for the Upgrade Readiness specifically, you don't need to have anything other than a free pricing tier to be able to use it. Okay, so let me get rid of that. Once you configure this, I'm just going to go ahead and select one of my existing ones, right? So here I have Analytics right there. And so from there, I can configure my workspace settings and basically shows you this that was configured, right? Just to tie that together. Whenever I configure the workspace settings up here, they show up and can be seen again if I want to go back and look at it here, right? All that to say, you basically need a Log Analytics workspace. Once you have that, then you can see Upgrade Readiness within it, okay? Now, so let me show that to you real quick. So I'm going to use this workspace, and it's already configured, right? I don't need to create anything. I just need to access this workspace. So how do I do that? Well, a couple of easy ways. I can go to Log Analytics here, and then be able to see my workspaces, right? And yeah, that's fine. And so I'll see my Log Analytics workspaces right here. I've got a few, so I can just click into this one. And since I already created this, and since I already created Upgrade Readiness as a solution inside of this workspace, all I need to do is go down to Solutions, and you will see Compatibility Assessment or Upgrade Readiness sitting right here. To be able to access it, I will just click on it, right? And then all the detail that I would have about Upgrade Readiness. So you can actually see that I have some data already present in Upgrade Readiness, right? So we'll come back to that in just a little bit, right? I want to show you the next step is how you would go about actually enrolling devices in Upgrade Readiness. So there are a few things, right? The first thing is every workspace like this has unique identifiers so that you as an organization know that you're communicating data specifically to your instance of the workspace. That's true for Upgrade Readiness as well. Compatibility Assessment, Upgrade Readiness synonyms, right? So how do you get that identifier to be able to make sure your data is going into your workspace? Well, in the Upgrade Readiness world, that identifier is called a commercial ID key, right? So you need to get that because that's going to be used along with all the deployment scripts and also be used in ConfigMgr to know that we're sending things to the right place. So how do we get it? It's pretty simple, actually. Just look down when you're in your compatibility assessment solution or your Upgrade Readiness solution to Upgrade Readiness settings. Click on that, and you will see here is your commercial ID key. You will want to capture that. Now, here's something while we're here, I'll just mention for you. So Upgrade Readiness is useful, very useful for real data, but you might want to get a sense for what Upgrade Readiness will do for you before you actually invest the time. So one of the things you can do is snap Upgrade Readiness into demo mode. I don't have that turned on right now. This is live data, but I could enable that and then give it a little bit of time, and then you would actually see that data show up, right? And some fake data, if you would, just so you can kind of get a feel for how things are going to look, right? The other thing here that's interesting is what target version of Windows 10 do you want, right? So we have several different target versions all the way back to 1507 and so on that you can use. We do recommend going with the latest one, right? But wherever you are and whatever your needs are. Right, and some main things, kind of in this settings window. So also, as we think about configuration, there are a couple of things that we need to consider. I'm not going to go into detail in terms of showing them here. I will mention them. They're in the documentation really easily, but you need to make sure that your network settings allow connection from the systems where we're running Upgrade Readiness scripts to upload the data to the endpoints in Azure, right? That's fully documented in the Windows Analytics Getting Started documentation from us. And then also make sure that all of the required updates and the latest monthly updates are applied to the system before you start running the Upgrade Readiness scripts on them. Make sure you reboot the target devices before you start running these scripts on them. Again, that's documented the same place in the Windows Analytics Getting Started documentation, so take a look there. Another thing we need to do as we start to approach this is make sure the diagnostic data is set correctly. And we do need basic as a minimum level of diagnostic data to be able to do this kind of thing. The enhanced level is the recommended level because we get enhanced diagnostics and so on to be able to better serve up your upgrade readiness kind of scenarios. Now, how do we configure these various pieces for telemetry? Well, there's a couple of ways. One is through group policy, or frankly, just setting it in the registry. And another would be using something like an MDM setting. So I'm going to show you, let me pull in just a Windows 7 machine. And let me show you the places that we can go. So Windows is not genuine. It really is. It's okay. Don't worry. I just haven't ever put a product key in here, but it should be fine. And so if I want to do it by group policy, I'm just going to show you local policy. You can translate this to the domain. So let me go load in local policy, file, add, remove, snap in, and group policy, object there, add, great, and okay. So if I expand this as big as I can, and then go down to computer configuration, make this a bit wider, computer configuration, administrative templates, and then Windows components, and then finally data collection. Actually, it's not in the Windows 7, is it? That's interesting. I probably don't have an AMX installed or something. That's okay. Let me just show you on my corporate workstation so you can see where it is. And I'll just do the same thing here. That's fine. I'll go through that. Add, remove, snap in, and local policy. Right. And then add that in. Sorry. And okay, so let's just go quickly back down to the same place. Local machine, computer configuration, administrative templates, Windows components, and here's data collection, right? And so here's going to be where we can go configure the telemetry that we need and so forth, right? Now, if you want to do this directly, we should go ahead and get out of this. If you want to do it directly, you can go into the registry. I'll do it back on this Windows 7 machine. And edit these directly. So if I want to go back up, let me start at the top, local machine, and then software, Microsoft, Windows, scroll down here, Windows, and then go to current version and policies. Policies doesn't appear to be here either. That's fine. When you do configure it, it would add the policies namespace, add data collection as an option, and then you can specify it there, right? There is also the MDM way in which you can control telemetry. And by the way, I'm showing you where you can do it here, right? If you have ConfigMgr, you don't really have to worry about that. You can set telemetry through ConfigMgr. I'll show you that. But just trying to give you a hint of where you would do it. So we pull that out of the way. If you have MDM and you want to manipulate that directly, you can absolutely do that. There's a configuration service provider called the DM client that's documented out at the DM client-CSP under the MDM documentation that we have out there for Windows 10, right? Okay, and then once we do that, we're ready to go and enroll pilot devices, right? So now, whenever you go out and you're ready to actually get devices going, you need to download what's called the deployment scripts. So the deployment scripts are, again, available and pretty easily accessible through the documentation. Just search for Upgrade Readiness Deployment Script, and you'll find our documentation and links to those deployment scripts. There's actually two versions of the scripts. There's what's called a pilot version and a deployment version. So I actually have those on my Windows 7 machine. Let me pull that back in so you can see. I have those on my Windows 7 machine. They are right here, right? So I have my pilot and my deployment. So pilot, as you would imagine, as the name suggests, is really intended for testing prior to production rollout. Now again, just in terms of where we're focused right now, we aren't factoring in ConfigMgr at all right now. We're thinking about a standalone configuration and usage of upgrade readiness in these deployment scripts, right? So the pilot is where we start. It's intended again for testing prior to production rollout. Before we start using this, again, we want to make sure the system is up to date with all the required hotfixes and updates. Now, here's a call out. You might look at some of these updates and see that they're not present, yet they don't seem to be installing or aren't being noted as required, right? If you don't have these updates, they are needed, right? So be very careful. So there are some situations where you might run an update and it does not detect itself as needed, and that may very well be because you don't have the latest servicing stack updates applied. So make sure you have the latest servicing stack updates applied so that these updates are able to be seen, scanned, and go, right? Okay. So all that said, how do these scripts work? Okay. So let me show you the construction. So I'm not going to use the deployment scripts. The deployment scripts are basically the same as the pilot. So if I look at pilot, you see that I have a number of things in here, including all the hotfixes, right? So the scripts can try to install the hotfixes for you if you want to. The deployment also has the hotfixes and a lot of the same components, a little bit different, right? A little bit different. And so here I have spent most of my time, and this is what we'll show in the lab for testing. So specifically, there's two components. There's the batch file that initiates the whole thing, right? And then there's also the PowerShell script itself that contains details. Now, you're going to maybe need to modify these a little bit. For sure, you'll have to modify it in one way, but you may have to modify it in other ways. I have done that a little bit myself, right? So let me show you what I did. So here's the batch file, run config. Just going to edit that. And so what I get is just a pretty simple batch file. Let me expand it out. So all I'm doing is I'm going to set the log path where I'm going to dump the logs as we run. I'm setting the commercial ID key. We need that. I just showed you where to get it. Setting my log mode, whether verbose is going on, and then finally the PowerShell commands to launch. Okay. Now, in my case, I just went ahead and modified the PowerShell script directly so that I could run this thing, and I substituted some of the variables into the PowerShell script itself. So here's my script, right? So let me go ahead and show you that. Edit that one. So it's opening ISE, and so just you can go through this. I'm going to close that for readability. And there's a number of different things that I've actually plugged in what the variables should be and so forth through the script. Again, you can do it either way. Use what makes sense to you, etc. But I'm going to run this. So the way that I'm going to run this, I should have just left PowerShell ISE open. Let me do it again. PowerShell, there it is. All right, and then I'm going to open this. Actually, I can't really do that. I skipped ahead a little bit. Let me show you what I mean. Let me minimize this. So the key to doing this, right, is to make sure that you run these scripts in the same context that you're ultimately going to run them in production. So knowing that I'm actually going to try to run these on user machines, these user machines may not actually have enough rights to run these. Right, so I need to make sure I'm running this as an administrator, and so here's what I'm going to do. And also, I want to run it under the system account, right? I want to run it under the system account. So how do I do that? So I have downloaded the tools onto this machine to allow me to launch a command prompt running as system. So let me show you. You might not have noticed it when I was in here. Upgrade Readiness under Pilot. I've actually downloaded a sysinternals tool called psexec. So I'm going to go to my command prompt running as system, and I'm going to launch another command prompt, this time running as, I'm going to launch my command prompt running as administrator, and then use that to launch a command prompt running as system. So let me show you. I believe, who am I logged on as? Okay. That's all. Okay, the desktop. Good. And so here we are. psexec -s-i and then cmd.exe will get us launching another command prompt as system. So if I do who am I, I'm now running completely as system. So now that I'm there, I want to run PowerShell ISE. And it should be in the path, so it should launch. And now that it is launching, it's going to go ahead and pull up as system. And so anything I do in here as system will run as system. So I'm going to go ahead and launch again. It did open it, but I'm going to go ahead and open that up again, right? And so I'm under pilot, and here's my PowerShell script. So I'm going to go ahead and run that and open it. So now that I have that open, now I can just simply run this, and it should generate logs for me. So I'm going to click run, and it's going to ask me some questions. Now you could pre-code this in there if you wanted to, but I'm just going to go ahead and supply the variables as we go. All right, so for run mode, you can, I know what this is, but you can actually cheat a little bit and go down into the script and see. So run mode is going to be either deployment or pilot. I want this to be pilot, so I'll put in pilot. And then the next thing is log path. So I want to put this, the logs into the correct log path. That's not it. I don't believe. Let me find the log path. Okay, so I'm just going to put it on the root. Good enough. And the commercial ID value. So this is one that I actually need. So I'm going to copy it in from the script that I created, or the batch file that I created. So let me go to Upgrade Analytics Pilot. I'll go back to the batch file, and I will get that. So edit. I didn't need to do that. Sorry. Let me go to Run Config. Edit. There we go. Here's the commercial ID key. Let me copy that to my clipboard. Good enough. Okay, so I can go back to my script. Hopefully it's still there. It is, and put that in. Off we go. And then log mode. I can also cheat up here and look for what log mode is. 0 console only, 1 to file and console, 2 to file only. So I'm going to go ahead and say 1 because I want to see the output. And off we go. And so Upgrade Analytics is running, checking machines, and so forth, creating output diagnostics. This takes a minute to run, and we'll see it. But I'll let that run. But I'm going to go to my output folder where I should be getting data. And you can see when this data was actually written. So you see there's one in the progress of being written right here. And I can look and just see all of the detail that's going to be sent up to Upgrade Readiness. Why is this important? Because if you're going to be sending data to Azure, almost certainly your security department is going to want to know what specifically you're sending. You know, these systems are sending. And so you can run the scripts on these systems, a few systems, and show the kind of detail that's created, right? And let them, you know, have a good sense of comfort about it, like installed KBs is what we're getting here. And, you know, nothing's encrypted. I can go look and see some of the detail and look at my app compat data and so on, programs that are being sent up, and here's an XML document that listed and so forth, right? So all of it's here. You can look at it, you can massage it, and it's still running, so take a minute. But after it's done, we'll upload this data to Upgrade Readiness in Azure, right? So this is how you do it. So with the deployment scripts, you'll get those put out there. You'll run those on a schedule. We recommend running them every 30 days, right? There's no reason to run them every day. There's really no reason also to run them on every single system in your environment, right? Pick a subset of systems that are kind of configured the same and representative systems across your environment for the different deployment kinds, and run them, and you should be good to go, right? However you choose to run these scripts. Once the data is uploaded to Upgrade Readiness, then in fact, you will actually see that data appear in the Upgrade Readiness portal. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out of the window, and let's go back in to look at what that looks like. So I'm in my Upgrade Readiness portal. If I go to Overview, you already saw that I do have data for lab systems, and my lab's not very exciting, but if I go and then click into this, I can explore all of the data that has been uploaded in, and just kind of see what it all is, right? So I can see detail about Spectre and Meltdown. Just scroll through all of these different things, and I'm not going to go into the weeds here again because my lab is not exciting. But you can see all the apps, and you can drill into these, and it's a really, really, really nice dashboard. Okay, so that's standalone Upgrade Readiness. All right, let me pull this back out. And how you configure it, how you can run it, and so forth with the scripts and so on. See all the data. Not that hard to configure really at all. So what about Config Manager? So how does Config Manager being in the picture change the flow at all? It really doesn't that much, right? Makes it simpler in a lot of ways. So here you have the IT Pro that's still in the picture, and the IT Pro can look at the Upgrade Readiness data. The IT Pro can also look at your site server, which will have the data that it's scraping from Upgrade Readiness. And the site server, this actually is a mistake. I should take this out. We don't require the Microsoft Management Agent on the site server at all. So through the magic of live editing in PowerPoint, I was able to take that away. The Microsoft Management Agent is needed for the Log Analytics connector or the OMS connector, but not for Upgrade Readiness because we're just going and retrieving that data live out of Azure. Okay, I'll show you how that works in a minute. Then you have your Config Manager clients that are running the Upgrade Readiness settings. They may or may not need to run the Upgrade Readiness deployment scripts themselves, right? So there is a way that you can just configure in-client settings for these systems to run and submit the Upgrade Readiness data through telemetry and so forth. You can run the scripts if you want that extra level of troubleshooting and so forth, or if you're having difficulty in some cases, but you may not necessarily have to do that in Config Manager, right? But then same thing, the data comes up here, processes, comes down to the site server, IT Pro evaluates it, and so on. So let me show you how to set that up. Okay, so we do require the Upgrade Readiness connector to be configured and running, and we do need the client settings to be configured. So let me show you how we set up Config Manager integration. And again, let me state as we get started, deploying the correct prerequisite updates, configuring the client settings should be, that I'm going to show you, should be sufficient in most environments. If you do encounter issues with Upgrade Readiness, potentially not receiving data from your devices or so on, you can get past that. You can certainly get some troubleshooting information by running the deployment script, but it should not be necessary in most cases. Okay, so let me pull in my Config Manager environment, if I can get my mouse to cooperate. Here's my Config Manager site server. Opened on the wrong screen. Let me pull it into the screen. All right, so here's my Config Manager site server. I'm under Azure Services. What I want to do first is I want to set up my client settings. Okay, I'm just going to show you in default client settings. Go to Properties, and you can either use the default or you can create a custom client setting for this, and go to Windows Analytics. And so the things that we need here are, first of all, decide whether we want to manage telemetry settings with Config Manager. The answer to that should be yes, because it's easier to do. And then you set your commercial ID key through here. This is the same commercial ID key as I had. Decide what level of telemetry, so full, enhanced, whatever it is, I'm allowing full. And then other, Windows 8 and so on if you have it. Right? So that's really it for setting up client settings. That's really all you should have to do. Again, shouldn't have to have deployment scripts. You can run them if you need to, and so forth. And I'm going to click OK. Right? So that's client settings. Now, the next thing we need to do is create a way that Config Manager can latch onto Upgrade Readiness and be able to pull the data from Upgrade Readiness. That's going to be in the form of a web app. So let me pull in my Azure environment again. All right, and I'm going to go create a web app. So let me go back to my, I'm going to go down to Azure AD actually. So let me go down to Azure AD, and I'm going to create a web app. Pretty easy, right? So the way that I do that is I go down to App Registrations, and I'm going to create a new application registration. So what I'm going to do is call it ConfigMgr Upgrade Readiness connector. And I'm going to take that whole thing. It's just going to be a web API. I do have to click this so that it gets the input. And I'm just going to put HTTP. Again, this does not have to be resolvable at all. It just has to be something that we can reference in ConfigMgr to latch onto, also something that we can permission. So I'm going to create this. Now, like you've seen me do before, I'm going to get a few key pieces of information off of it that I'm going to need. So first, I'm just going to keep the display name here and paste it out again on a side window where I'm running Notepad, because I'm going to reference this again later. Okay. And then also, I need to get details such as the application ID key, which is the same as the client ID. And that's here. So I'm going to go grab that, copy it. All right. And then I'm going to go get, I'm going to have to create a key for this. So I'm just going to call it key. Good enough. Give it no expiration time. And then save it, which actually produces the key. Go grab that. Store that off. So just making notes again on the Notepad file. And then I do need to get the tenant name and so forth, and the tenant ID for this. So I'm going to grab that. That is something that I'm not going to actually capture. I'll show you where it is. It's under Properties. So I'm going to go grab the detail and save it onto my Notepad doc, and I'll use it again in just a minute. So I'll start this again just so you can see I'm deliberately putting the directory ID off the bottom of the screen. You can see the name and you can see the directory ID. That's what we're going to want as we go fill out the wizard in just a minute. So with the web app created and with all the information collected that we'll need to use in a minute, the next step before we go to ConfigMgr is to take this web app and make sure that it has permissions into the resource group where what we've just created exists. Now, just as a reminder, so we created Upgrade Readiness inside a Log Analytics Workspace. Let me go back. Let me maximize this. So if I go back to my Log Analytics Workspace, just as a reminder, this is the Log Analytics Workspace where Upgrade Readiness was created. This Log Analytics Workspace exists inside of a resource group, right? And then if I look down under Solutions, Upgrade Readiness exists inside this Log Analytics Workspace, right? So ultimately what we need to do is use that web app to make sure that when ConfigMgr uses that web app, it can have access into this Log Analytics Workspace. Well, and in a broader sense, since this Log Analytics Workspace exists inside a resource group, we want to give rights to that web app to the resource group as a whole so it can get what it needs, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. If not, I'll try it again in a minute. So to do that, let me go back up to resource groups, and this is the one, or I could just click here, either way. Let me just go to this, right? And the resource group has an access control level on it as well. So I want to grant the web app rights. So I'm going to add the role assignment, and I'm going to add a contributor role as soon as Azure catches up. There we go. Should be there. Any moment. There we are. So I'm going to add a contributor role and select the web app that I just created. And there it is. And save. Right? So now I have effectively taken that web app, granted it rights to the resource group, these objects that we care to access exist within the resource group, and so should be good to go. So let me go ahead then and create the connector in ConfigMgr. So to do that, go back to Azure Services, right-click, Configure Azure Services, and this time we're going to do the Upgrade Readiness connector. All right, now I'm just going to call it Upgrade Readiness. Cool. And so notice I do not have the OMS connector created, or again, OMS connector is the same thing as a log analytics connector, so I don't have that created. It's not required to be able to set this thing up. So I don't have an app here. I can't browse to an app here, so I can't create an app here. I need to import the details from the app we just created. So let's go grab these things in no particular order from my Notepad doc where I saved them off. First will be the application name. Then will be the URL for it down here. And then finally will be the client ID, which is the same as the application ID. I'll grab the secret key here, put it in. I will need to give a time frame well ahead of what I will probably ever need. I'll go on over to the year 2021, and then we'll stop. Good enough, right? And then the tenant name will be Microsoft. And the tenant ID, I need to paste in. I'm going to pause while I do that, and I'll be right back. So I've added the tenant ID. I've moved my screen over intentionally where all you can see are the first two characters of the tenant ID. And I will click Verify to make sure everything is good. It is. So I'll click OK, and now I have my web app created. So the next thing is I need to go through my collection piece and see if everything hooks up okay. So let's go there. So we're querying Azure with all of the configuration we just put in, and we did get enough information to figure all of this detail out, right? And so good to go. You can see, you know, in some cases, if you have multiple choices, you can choose, but we are finding what we need, so we've got everything right. If you don't get all of this populated correctly, then you have something wrong, right? One of the things that I've done sometimes before is instead of creating the web app to have permissions in the resource group, I've tried to create it to have permissions in the log analytics workspace as an example, or directly in the upgrade readiness or compatibility assessment solution. And that's not enough. I wouldn't, if you do that, it's not going to populate all three of these. It's just going to populate maybe the first one, right? So do that. Make sure you get all three populated. If not, check your configurations, and you should be good to go. So now I'm going to click Next, and we will go ahead and configure the connector, and we are good to go. The connector is configured, and we're good. Okay, so we have this created. As I said, we're good. How do we know that that we are good, right? So I'm on the Upgrade Readiness connector. I can synchronize with Upgrade Readiness right now, no problem, and then you can monitor all of that in DMP downloader log to validate. Sorry, I got distracted by something. So DMP downloader. Here we are. So in theory, we should be able to see, oh, it's opening a notepad. Okay, we'll go with that. We should be able to see Upgrade Analytics download is going, registering key. Let's see, last time DMP downloader synced. On we go, recently synced, updating. You know, so this is the information you can track as it goes through and synchronizes, right? So let me just check it one more time. This time I'm going to try to open it in Trace, see if it will cooperate with me. It doesn't want to refresh the new lines. That's okay. I'll try to open it again in Notepad, see if anything new has come up. Right. All right. So a little bit more. Calling OMS Upgrade Analytics download, right? Updating the interval. And it's saying it's going to skip it because it recently did it, which is fine. This is where you would actually track what's going on, right? Now, I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but let me show you in the console, if you have successfully synchronized, then you will have data in your upgrade readiness dashboard. Right now, this doesn't exactly match what I have in my lab. Not a huge, or my workspace. Not a huge surprise because I just connected the connector, and this lab goes through a lot of changes. So not totally surprised. But this is how you can see the data for upgrade readiness. Now, remember, whenever you do this, then give time 48 to 56 hours before you expect things to start to show up in the console. Right now, once you have this here, the nice thing, again, we're just consuming data, but you can see based on whatever collection you choose, right? I'll just maybe change it a little bit as I go through. Let's see here, right? So you can just see based on the collection membership, in that collection, one system is ready to upgrade and one can't. I could, drill in maybe a little bit more to that and understand about it and why it cannot upgrade, and look at the system and see that it's online. And anyway, kind of a neat way to do it. And then if you have systems that are ready to upgrade right here, then you can go ahead and build a collection from them. Create a collection of all systems ready to upgrade, right? And then you can then target your deployment of the upgrade to that collection. So that's what I mean when I say ConfigMgr is a consumer of the upgrade readiness data. The upgrade readiness data, though, comes from Azure. We just use it to make things easier. And as before, now that I've added the upgrade readiness connector, let's go into the registry and show you one more place. So here under the SMS Cloud connection key, we had previously filled out the Microsoft Store for Business information. Now we have the upgrade readiness section completed out as well. So we know that this is where the information is. If we need to go back and look at something, we can do that, but it's all right here. So I tried to show you the DMP downloader log. I'm going to try one more time. I don't think it's going to be updated. That's okay if it's not. All right. So trying to sync. I'm going to try another sync now. Let me do another one just real quick. It's every 32, 92 minutes. I'm going to try it again just to see. Again, don't think it'll work, but let's try it. So here's my upgrade readiness. I'm going to sync now. Still syncing with upgrade readiness. So it's not going to do it timely. That's okay. That's why whenever I did this before, I actually captured some of the logs that show what's actually going on during the sync. So let's start with DMP downloader. All right, so if I look at DMP downloader in this saved log, and this is admittedly a very old log from previous versions, but still it's not that out of date that it's changed a whole lot. So let's see, OMS upgrade download. So what we see here is that we're doing the download, right? Here's where we're getting the file, and you can see that's an OMS file that's actually getting downloaded from upgrade readiness. So DMP downloader is responsible, goes out, grabs that information from upgrade readiness, brings it down, and then you can see that it's moving it for processing over to HMan right here. So we know that Hierarchy Manager is actually a part of processing this, and so the download finished and we're good to go. So when the sync happens, you should see something similar to that. Now, if I go to the HMan log, and again, this is a historical log from a while ago, let it load and look at the OMS file. Find the OMS file, OMS. So you can see that we have the OMS file. We're processing it and successfully checking, and on we go. And so that's what actually processes the data into the database. And I mentioned that ConfigMgr is just a consumer of the data. And so if you look, what I did before is I actually captured the data and wanted to show it to you in that .oms file. So it moves really quickly through HMan. I went ahead and captured it. Here's, by the way, the file where I'm working from it. There we go. Here's the file itself. You can see it. I'll just open it up in Notepad, and you'll see the detail. So essentially, again, this is really old. It's not even I probably have machine names in here I don't have anymore, but you can see the particular information coming down from the OMS connector and the decision, or from the Upgrade Readiness service and so on. This gets processed into ConfigMgr, gets loaded into the database, and that's what actually populates this view, right? So mechanically, that's how it works, right? So if you ever need to troubleshoot it, at least you'll understand kind of how things flow. All right, so let's get rid of the lab for a moment, pull it back out of the picture. And that's kind of a tour of how Upgrade Readiness is configured and integrated in ConfigMgr. Now, let's pull this all together. And that's what this slide is, trying to kind of piece together all the things that you've seen and kind of explain it, right? So we have our site server here. And again, I forgot to get rid of that. Let me use live editing in PowerPoint and get rid of that, because we absolutely do not require the Microsoft monitoring agent for Upgrade Readiness itself, right? For the log analytics connector, we do, not for Upgrade Readiness, so we should be good there. And so the ConfigMgr site server has the service connection point, has DMP downloader. It will go out and connect with Azure using the web app that we've configured and put into the connector properties. The web app exists within an Azure Active Directory. We have permissioned the web app so that it has access to our resource group, which contains the Upgrade Readiness piece. Probably more realistically, I should have changed this so that it's the Upgrade Readiness piece is contained in the log analytics connector. In fact, let me make a quick adjustment. Okay, that's the way it should look. Just made a little bit of adjustment, into it and so forth. And so Upgrade Readiness contained within the Log Analytics Workspace. The Log Analytics Workspace is contained in the resource group. So we have our web app that can reach over and have access into the resource group, and then can have access into all of the stuff within. So hopefully this helps explain kind of the flow and how things work. All right, so now that we've seen how it works, what about some troubleshooting ideas, tips, tricks, right? So we've covered a little bit of this already, but just to bring highlight back to it. So in terms of deployment, right, getting the settings out to the clients to enable them to share data forward with Azure Upgrade Readiness, and then be able to get that data to ConfigMgr, a couple of things. First, I'm going to do these in opposite order. We talked about already deployment script usage versus client settings. And we already mentioned that in most circumstances, in a ConfigMgr integrated environment, we can use client settings, and we don't need to use the deployment scripts in order to get that data forward into Upgrade Readiness. In some cases, you might need to use the deployment script. So if you're running into an issue, then the deployment scripts can really help you, because it will give you the logging and different things to be able to see what's going on. The scripts may exit with certain exit codes. So the various exit codes, and there's a number of them, that could come from the script are all documented. If you search for Upgrade Readiness deployment script again and scan down, then the script exit codes will be there, right? So that can be very useful to help you understand what's happening. In terms of troubleshooting, some things we've just seen, just to go through them again, you can see the download happening of the Upgrade Readiness data in DMP Downloader. You can see it actually loading and being processed through HMAN and the Hierarchy Manager log, and then you can see the results populated in the dashboard. Right, a couple of logs there, and good to go. All right, so really that's it. Actually, yeah, really that's it in terms of what I wanted to show you today. So that rounds out the session. Just a couple of extra things, just as resources. So good information here in terms of additional detail about Upgrade Readiness. And with that, we will wrap this session, and we will see you next time.